In Gary this morning, 4th Avenue is blocked off between Whitcomb and Noble. There's a major fire blazing away at a commercial building in the 3600 block, West 4th Avenue. There are closures in place. Looking at I-55 southbound right near 355. There's a crash there involving 3 vehicles. Traffic is heavy from Lamont Road to the Veterans Memorial Tollway. Right now we are looking at a drive time of about 32 minutes from Lakeshore Drive to 355. Keep an eye on that. Inbound, expect a little bit of a gaper slowdown. Then farther north, the ramp to the inbound ride is heavy from the Stevenson Expressway. On the inbound ride, you're looking at about a 2-minute delay from Cermak to the Circle. I'm Jim Calamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast. A milder day ahead, clouds and sunshine mixed. High of 49, 32 right now. Next news at 7. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560 The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560 The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy, and we're still doing postmortem on the election that came and went, including, by the way, the number of House Republican pickups continues to grow.
Oh, yeah.
House Republicans, are within shouting distance. I don't think they're going to get there. Shouting distance of an actual takeover of the House, which was thought impossible. Impossible is too strong a word, but very, very remote chance that Republicans could pick up the House in 2020, and particularly if President Trump were to lose the election. No chance. And yet we went from 5 plus 5 on election night to tracking to plus 9, plus 11, plus 12, plus 13, maybe even with some races that are still yet to be called, that are still being counted, including here one in Illinois where Jim Oberweis has not conceded defeat yet and is looking at about a 1,000-vote deficit against Lauren Underwood, the incumbent, and is looking again for a recount and help with that recount. But the bottom line is a surprising performance by House Republicans, given the context of what happened at the national level.
And Brett Baer was on Friday in Georgia. I mean, this recount that they're having there might help David Perdue because he had 49.7%. And if some of the ballots were spoiled and there's ballots that were not counted, he could be put over the edge. So that's good
not
news.
Require a runoff.
Right.
But it's still interesting to see sort of what's happening as the parties continue to realign. I think one would argue the racial gap narrowing because Trump improved his percent of the vote among both Black Americans and Latino Americans.
Best a Republican candidate has done in 60 years.
But as Chris Arnade writes, the education gap widening. We're pleased now to be joined again by Chris Arnade. He's a writer and photographer, photojournalist, really, he's turned into, covering addiction and poverty in America. He's the author of a book we've spoken about before with him, Dignity, Seeking Respect in Back Row America, that I encourage you to check out, and as well as following him on Twitter. It's Arnade, A-R-N-A-D-E, Chris Arnade. It's a really interesting work that he's done through his travels in Back Row America, as he calls it. Chris, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So it drill down on this piece that you wrote about the education gap widening between Democrats and Republicans as manifest by the presidential results thus far.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, Democrats are right to celebrate having probably won the presidency pretty cleanly, as it were, but the details should really worry them. As you spoke in your lead-in here, I mean, the House went against them. But the details of how Biden won, and he barely won. He won, with 200,000 votes here and there in certain states, should be really concerning to the Democrats because they lost a lot of places that were traditionally, quote, their base. The most jaw-dropping change was along the Rio Grande border in Texas, which are, largely Mexican-American communities, very poor, one county that shifted to 50%. Now, Trump didn't win it, but he almost did. And given the fact that Hillary Clinton had won it 80% to 20%, and then Biden barely won it this time, it shows you, and that's all across the country. You can look at a lot of places that once were thought as kind of places where Democrats could count on strong turnout amongst more urban Black communities, more rural Black communities, and then of course Mexican Americans and Puerto Ricans. And well, it just didn't happen. They did vote largely for Biden, but in numbers that should really worry them, because there was a big swing towards Trump that really stands on head a lot of what we've been told over the last 4 years, how the voters are racist, and that's why they support him. And yet you have a swell of support amongst Latinos and more Blacks voting for him than did last time.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to add something to what you're saying, it is remarkable that Biden actually underperformed Hillary Clinton in every major metropolitan area around the country, except Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Detroit, Michigan, Atlanta, Georgia, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, I don't want to get onto the tangent of what that might mean in terms of election integrity, but nonetheless, taking the ballots as cast, underperformed Hillary except in every major metro area except those four.
Well, Biden actually, in your local area, for instance, Lake County, which is where Gary, Indiana is, a place I know pretty well, is that voted more Republican this time than it has in a long time. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of changes going on here that show that what is going on here is what is consistent, though, is the people who switched to Trump from last time, the Latinos and a few African Americans, are like what I wrote my book about. They're people with not a lot of education. Now, I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that actually. I think the problem is we have too much education in this country. So I prefer hanging out with people who don't have a lot of education. And I think they have a lot in aggregate have a lot more sense sometimes than the faculty of a department, university. But so I think what you're seeing here is this kind of. One of the things the Democrats have always been able to say, we're the party of the working class, and that might have been true 40 years ago, but it's not true anymore. They're becoming more and more in the way they talk to people and the way they think, the way people see politics. They don't see politics as a bunch of as a list of policies. They see politics as kind of this kind of sport on TV, and the way the Democrats kind of come off more and more is they really only care about their college professor base, not the steel workers, not the the guys, the people who work in retail. And so there's this real sense that the Democratic Party is really lost touch with what it once was, which I think you could have said back in Jimmy Carter period and there that there really was this sense that it was a party of the working class, and it's becoming a party of the educated class, not the party of the working class.
Now, were you surprised that so many Americans, this is the most that any Americans have ever voted in any presidential election. 72.3 million for President Trump, and Biden got, 74 million? That's a very large turnout.
Yeah, I think there were a lot going on. I think, a lot of people, I liken it to like a Super Bowl, right? Politics is like a Super Bowl. People who don't the presidential election is like a Super Bowl. People who don't generally pay attention to football still tune in on the Super Bowl, and this one is a really exciting Super Bowl. And there was a lot going on. There was clear choice here, and I think a lot of people were motivated to come out. But I think one of the things that I actually I'm a Democrat actually, in where I come from. But one of the things I will say is one of the things that the Republicans have generally thought. I think there's been this idea that Democrats have had that. If the higher the turnout, the better it is for their party, and that's not necessarily true when you look at the numbers here. I think it's one thing that there was a lot of turnout, but a lot of the turnout was in places that helped Republicans, and I think one of the things that going forward, I think the path for at least if I was advising the Republican Party, the path I think is pretty clear. It was Trump motivated a lot of people to turn out who wouldn't have turned out otherwise, and he brought in a lot of people. I think that in the past might not have felt comfortable in the GOP, like Mexican Americans. One of the things I will say to my conservative friends is, you can go to Hammond, you can go down to Hammond and see it. I think there are, a lot of Mexican Americans in particular, are a good fit for, the Republican Party and a lot of the cultural issues. It's faith, family, and flag. And those three, and they're not embarrassed to be proud of American, to be American. A lot of them work very hard to get citizenship, and they're very proud to be here. And I think, I think that's one thing you're seeing in the numbers is the Mexican Americans in particular, who work in things like the oil and gas industry, who work in manufacturing. I think can very much easily become a part of the Republican Party if the Republican Party, wants them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I think one of the things you're seeing, I mean, certainly being advocated by conservatives like me, is switch out this effort to get hate has no home here, overeducated Seven Sisters grads in the suburbs and go for Mexican American immigrants or second generation, third generation. I don't really care. But yes, exactly. Switch out working people for, the idle sophists in the suburbs.
One of the things I wrote in my piece is, I think a lot of pundits and a lot of political operatives get it wrong when they don't recognize, they look at some of the things Trump did, especially the journalists, and they made fun of it, like, the McDonald's spread I think it was for, I forgot which team he celebrated with. He went out and bought $400.
Yeah, Clemson, right.
Yeah. And then hugging the flag, at the CPAC meeting, this idea that one of the things that so frustrates me in the discourse out there is this idea that America's awful, America's awful, still sucks, America's but why do you think so many people want to come here? They love America. You go into these Mexican American communities, you go in these new American communities, especially ones who've been here a few generations, and they love America. They're very proud to be here. And so when they see reporters or pundits on TV, talking about how bad America is, that turns them off in a big way. And when they see the Republicans, literally embrace the flag like Trump did, that kind of cheesiness that is seen by many people as cheesy, to them isn't cheesy at all. That's what they, they're really happy to be here,
yeah.
Because they've escaped a lot of poverty and violence to get here, and and so.
Well, they haven't suffered the oppression that my fellow Northwestern grads have suffered. So that's why they still love America.
One of the things I try to get across in my book that very frustrates me about the political community these days is they don't understand the people they advocate for. They think they understand them. They read about them in a book, but they don't. They don't really. They live separate from them.
Well, here's the thing, and it gets interesting to get your perspective as a Democrat. And I'm not calling you a socialist; I'm calling you a Democrat. But this is sort of underlying idea of the left that Black Lives Matter, these groups, we are, basically the vanguard class ushering in a proletariat revolution to transform America for you. And as often happens with these revolutions advertised as the proletariat's getting left behind.
Yeah, you look at just the language being used by the Democratic Party. Now, I will say Biden did a much better job, of all the Democrat candidates, he was the best in navigating this, because I think he is much less that than the party apparatus around him. Mm-hmm. So I think any other candidate would have lost to Trump. So I think the Democrats did a good job in putting Biden up there, because he's had to, he's been elected for 40 years and had to go out and deal with voters. But this idea, that I think where the GOP missed an opportunity was, pivoting towards things at the end that I think they had focused on the defund the police calls and things like that. I think they would have been in a better situation, because nobody in these working class communities wants to defund the police. Now, they want different, they would like different types of policing. That's true. That's no thing. But they don't want to defund the police.
Right.
You go into Gary, Indiana. You ask people if they want to. They're going to throw you out.
Right.
You go into urban parts of Milwaukee where the crime is bad and where they've dealt for 30 years with. They've overcome the 90s and the 80s when crime was even worse. They do not want to defund the police. They want a different type of. They want different policing. but they do not want to fund it. And so I think this idea that we should.
Chris? Did we lose him?
Yeah.
Chris, you still there?
Hello.
Oh.
Well, we had him for a time.
Okay, I guess we got cut off there with Chris Arnade. He is a writer and photographer covering addiction and poverty in America. I wanted to ask him about marriage. Darn it. He's also the author of the book Dignity, Seeking Respect in Back Row America, which you should check out. As you heard, he's a really interesting guy, and he actually respects the people he profiles, which is novel.
He doesn't bully them if they don't agree with him.
It contrasts him from the D.C. press corps and its outposts around the country, like here in Chicago.
And Chris joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. Michigan's radical governor wants to shut down an oil pipeline. General Motors recalls 69,000 electric vehicles over fire threat. Those stories next.
If you've fallen behind in your credit card payments during the shutdown, you're probably feeling some added pressures. And even a brief history of late payments can lead to a big drop in your credit score. But you don't have to solve these problems alone. Trinity Debt Management can help. We'll work with your creditors, put a stop to late fees and other penalties, and make a plan that helps you get caught up. We'll also consolidate your bills into one easy-to-manage monthly payment and negotiate much lower interest rates. Not only will you find immediate relief, you'll save thousands. And don't worry, it's not alone. It's a smart way to get back on track. All you have to do is give Trinity a quick call, and we'll take care of the rest. Right now, no one really knows what the future